Hello Street Snappers, and welcome to another street photography video. Today's video is all about confidence, and I'm hoping that by the end of this video you will be overflowing with confidence as a street photographer. For many of us, the biggest obstacle we come across in street photography is fear, or at least a feeling of unease or discomfort about shooting on the streets. Now, the good news is that this affects almost everyone in varying degrees, and it's certainly not uncommon. The even better news is there is lots that we can do to minimize those fears and hit the streets with confidence. This is something I come across every single day when I'm out there teaching street photography. I usually have 6 people on a street photography workshop. And when I ask the question, who feels uncomfortable doing street photography? Every time 4 or 5 hands go up. So amongst those new or newish to street photography, this fear, and I know fear might be a strong word for it, but let's stick with it for a minute. This fear is pretty much the norm. And there's a sliding scale. Some people have a minimal amount of fear, like Bruce Gilden. He knows no fear. And for some people, it's a scale. The top end of the scale, they have abject terror. But the question is, how can we deal with it? How can we banish that fear from our street shooting? I'm going to suggest a number of steps you can take to help eliminate fear and minimize any discomfort in your street shooting. Right, first and foremost, you need to work out what kind of street photographer you are or you want to be. What's your personality? Think about it for a minute. If you're an introvert, then you're probably not best suited to the Bruce Gilden style, the in-your-face approach. Like this shot, which was shot with a 28mm lens at very close quarters, so I was very close to this woman. Would it suit you? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe it would suit you better to shoot scenes like this, where people are less prominent, or perhaps something abstract, like this one maybe. You know, this is not getting in anyone's face, it's not causing anybody any distress, including you. So the first thing you need to do is work out what will work for you. You can't easily change what you are and your personality, so don't force yourself into doing something you hate. So maybe start off with what could be thought of as a less challenging style of street photography. Now let's look at the sort of subject you might shoot. And clearly, if street photography terrifies you, then don't jump in at the deep end and start to shoot people at very close range, because you'll hate it and you'll probably give up on street photography, and nobody wants that. So try a gentler, more relaxed approach. Shoot stuff that could never bite you back or cause you stress. So, like in any sphere of life, if you're going to confront a problem, you need to recognize exactly what that problem is. So we need to work out what your fears are based on, and are those fears realistic? Is realistic the right word? Maybe it's rational. Are those fears truly rational? So what exactly is your fear based on? Do you have a fear of making people angry? A fear of physical violence? A fear of attention from the police? Fear of being called a weirdo or a creep? Fear of being forced to delete an image? Fear of having your motives misunderstood, maybe if there are kids around? Or is it just a fear of being challenged, maybe? And once you know what your concerns are, you can start to think about them rationally with a sense of perspective, working through your head why this is so and what you can do to change the situation. Is your fear rational? What's the worst that could happen here? Always have that in your mind. What's the worst that could happen? And my guess is probably not very much. Next, and this is really important, and you really need to get into the right headspace. Fear is all in the mind, and you must, right from the beginning, be comfortable with the fact that you're not doing anything wrong. either legally, morally, or ethically. Okay? Taking someone's picture is not a sin. It's not against the law, usually anyway, and I'll come back to that. But then we have the question of ethics, and we all have different ethical codes, different boundaries, different red lines. And it's not for me to tell you what to do. I know what's right for me, but it may not be right for you. So you need to decide, in your heart of hearts, what's right and what's wrong. And I'm not going to philosophize about the right and wrong, but if it feels wrong, then it probably is, okay? Take me, for example. I'll avoid shooting people who are in a bad place, such as homeless people. And taking pictures out there in public space is perfectly a normal thing to do. It's not weird, it's not creepy, it's not wrong, it's fine. And we must keep reminding ourselves of that. Street photography is fine. It's an okay thing to do. And when it comes to the law, the main point here is that you need to be confident of your legal position. And this is a huge area, and probably one I'll cover in a separate video at some point in the near future. But in the meantime, just find out what the law is and what it says about street photography, where you're shooting or where you live. Here in the UK, for example, if you're in a public place, you can shoot pretty much anyone or anything without permission. If I can see it, I can shoot it. And that's what I keep in my own mind all the time. If I can see it, I can shoot it. But you need to be confident about what you can and can't do in your part of the world. And there's a very good Wikipedia page that lists pretty much every country in the world and gives you the street photography rules and regulations and laws and customs and sensitivities. And it's always worth checking that out. So if I'm traveling anywhere, I'll do my research beforehand and just work out what I can and can't do. And that will just help me be more confident. Next, try to remember that people are not interested in you, particularly if you're shooting in a big city like London or New York or Milan. They're so self-absorbed, and people are much more connected with their phones and their conversations and their music than what's going on around them. So you're probably not being noticed as much as you think you are. You're not standing out. So the next thing you need to think about is your demeanor and how you come across as a street photographer. How do you present yourself to the world? How will people perceive you? Do you stand out like this? Or do you blend in? I mean, I tend to use a small camera for street photography, like this Fujifilm X100V. And with this, I will look more like a harmless tourist than I would do a photographer. And I'm no threat to anyone. So start waving a Canon 1DX around, and you're public enemy number one. So aim to behave, to move, even to dress like the people around you so that you don't stand out. People are less likely to notice you. Don't do things that will draw attention to yourself. If your camera has any beeps or pings or clicks that can be turned off, turn them off. Any blinking lights that you don't need on your camera, turn them off. You're not going to need them when you're shooting on the streets. So just try to be a bit stealthy. And related to this point is try to avoid looking creepy. When we're nervous or uncomfortable, we often exude negative body language. And that negative body language only compounds the problem, and we start to look furtive or creepy, as though we're doing something wrong, which of course we're not. And if we're acting strangely, people will pick up on this, and their animal instinct will tell them something's wrong, something's not right about this guy. And sometimes just relaxing a little and smiling inwardly is all you need to do. So my next tip is from the psychologists, and this is all about desensitization. And the idea is that you start further away and then get closer to your subjects as time goes on, and this will help your confidence grow. And this principle comes from, I think, how psychologists or medics deal with phobias, and it's one of the techniques they use. And if you imagine, if you have a fear of spiders, you might get taught to have a spider 100 meters away at the end of your garden. And then a couple of days later, you have that spider a little bit closer, say 75 meters away, then 50 meters, then 25 meters. And eventually the spider will be at your feet. And by that time, you are desensitized to the spider. It's not a problem anymore. So translate this into street photography. And maybe you could think about starting shooting from a distance where you won't be noticed. And then move closer and closer. And eventually you will come to the normal shooting range, which, might be something like 2, 3, 4 meters away. And I'm not suggesting everybody wants to be a Bruce Gilden and gets right in your face. If you want to do that, fine. But, there is a perception that that's what street photography is all about. And there is a lot more to it than that. And I would advise not doing this by starting shooting from across the road with a long lens. Start as you mean to go on. And if you are going to go through this desensitization process, it's a really good discipline to get to know one lens really well in street photography. And I suggest starting off with something like a 35mm, or with this camera, it's 23mm. So 35, when I say 35, I do mean in full frame terms. So start off with something like a 35 from further away, and just gradually get closer with your feet. Just constantly get closer and closer to people. Another thing you can do is to imagine you're shooting a space with no people in it. Just block the people out of your mind. Ignore them. They're not there. And then when you've taken a few shots, keep your camera at eye level and carry on shooting, either in the space where those people have now vacated, or in a slightly different direction. So just keep shooting. The people are there. They've now gone, but you just keep shooting. You're looking to where they were. So people will not think that you're interested in them. They'll think you're interested in something else, something that's behind them maybe. So my next tip is to find situations where you'll find shooting easier. Maybe crowded places rather than quiet ones. Shooting in big cities is much easier from this point of view than shooting in small towns. Use things like marches, protests, or festivals. That can be a good starting point to help build your confidence. You'll find this thing a whole lot easier if you blend in and you don't stand out as a photographer. And just bear in mind, a lot of people are wary of cameras for various reasons, and even more wary of photographers. So I always recommend that you look more like a tourist than a photographer. Use a small camera and don't walk around with a huge photographer's backpack and a belt with pouches and stuff. And I usually use a wrist strap, a small wrist strap if it's on a little camera like this. I'm no threat to anyone. I'm not a serious photographer. I'm a tourist, and I am just no threat. So do everything you can not to draw attention to yourself. Wear dark clothes, you'll blend in more, you'll be less noticed. Walk slowly, you will blend in more. So blend in. My next tip is maybe a controversial one in the street photography world. Some people will like it, some won't. I've got to say, I'm not a huge fan, but it worked for some people. And that is to use techniques to disguise what you're doing. Now, if we go back to what I said at the beginning of this video, we really must try to get to the place where we're comfortable about what we're doing and don't feel the need to disguise it. But maybe some of these covert techniques can help us get there. They can help us get to that position of comfort, and it's a gradual process. So I'm not dismissive of them, and they can certainly help you. So for example, shooting from the hip, where you take the picture with the camera down at waist level down here somewhere. A lot of people do that, and you can either use the flippy screen to compose or just guess, and with a bit of trial and error, a bit of practice, you'll eventually get this angle right, this vertical angle right. Takes a bit of practice. I've got mixed views about it. For me, this would be a last resort. And I certainly wouldn't recommend making it a habit, shooting from the hip. I know people who teach this technique on workshops, but my view is that it gets you into bad habits from the beginning, and those bad habits are hard to break. And particularly if you're learning this from the beginning, start as you mean to go on, get into good habits, get into good practices. Bearing in mind what we said before about desensitization, it might just help you get where you want to be. So maybe give it a go. What do other people do? Others find it helpful to shoot in what we could call video mode. And I don't mean switching your camera to video mode, but if there's something here that you want to shoot, you just start to move across with the camera like this and just press the button at the right time and just carry on as though you were shooting a video, and people will assume that they were just part of the scene and you were probably not interested in them. Or you could pretend to be confused, pretend to be the beginner. And Gary Winogrand was the expert at this. And just watch some of the videos here on YouTube about how Gary Winogrand used to work. And he's one of the true street photography greats and a hero of mine. And he had a unique way of working in the streets, in that he was a deliberate fumbler. He always looked confused. He would fumble with his camera. He would he would take a picture and look at the settings and do this and really not know what he was doing and be doing this. And that's how he worked. And people probably just saw him as a harmless idiot, maybe a bit of a beginner. But this confected confusion was disguising the fact that he was actually taking pictures, and it worked for him, and it worked very well for him. But you will find your own things. You will find your own things that work for you, your own ways. If you want to disguise what you're doing, maybe you'll adapt some of these techniques. You'll look at what other people do and adapt those, and eventually you'll slip into a nice groove. Another interesting guy, Winogrand just made me think of him, another interesting guy to watch was Mark Cohen, who would often just point his camera and shoot without even looking through the viewfinder. He called it the no-finder approach, and it certainly worked for him. And it's actually, with modern cameras, with a big LCD screen at the back to look at, it's a pretty easy thing to do. So, the next point, and I think this is a killer tip, and most people find that this is a game changer for them, and this is to avoid eye contact, and it's something I do all the time. Unless I need eye contact to make the picture work, okay, and sometimes I do, unless I need eye contact, you'll never see me making eye contact with people on the streets. Because as soon as that eye contact is established and the person sees your camera, the spell is broken. The moment's gone. Their sixth sense tells them that you're going to take a picture. The chances are that they will stop doing what they were doing, they'll turn away, they'll walk off, and you've missed it. And Joel Meyerowitz calls this bruising the scene. And a great way to stop your scene getting bruised is to avoid eye contact. Trust me, it works. Just try it. It takes a bit of practice. And, we're all nice people. Eye contact is such a natural human thing. But when you're out there on the streets doing street photography, just try it. Avoid eye contact. So that just about sums it up. I think the main thing is to be comfortable in your own skin. And that has to come from you. If you incorporate all of these tips into your shooting routines, you should start to feel your confidence increasing quite quickly. Just remember, relax, smile, be happy, be friendly towards the world. And my guess is you'll have a pretty relaxed and warm experience out there. Well, I hope you found this useful, and as always, I will be happy to answer questions. Just pop them in the box below. I hope to see you next time. And in the meantime, please stay safe, healthy and sane, and keep shooting. Bye for now.